She gave water to a wounded Apache scout, and his warriors returned carrying her dowry. The sun hung like a copper penny in the cloudless sky. Clara Hawkins knelt at the edge of a muddy creek, her skirt pulled around her knees. The water trickled between her fingers, cool against her sun-baked skin. She watched ripples spread across the surface, distorting her reflection. A sound broke the stillness. Distant at first, then growing, hoofbeats drumming against hard earth. Clara's heart quickened. She turned, shielding her eyes against the glare. They appeared like heat mirages on the horizon. Apache warriors, 7 of them, riding hard toward her position. Their faces were painted for war, feathers and leather adorning their bodies. Weapons glinted in the harsh light. Clara's gaze dropped to the man lying in the shadow of a mesquite tree just yards away. An Apache scout, wounded and barely conscious. His blood had darkened the thirsty ground beneath him. She had found him an hour earlier, dragged him to shade, and been tending his wounds. Now his people were coming. Run, her father's voice commanded in her head. Run now. But Clara remained still, watching the riders approach, feeling the weight of her choice pressed down on her shoulders like the desert heat. The Hawkins homestead sat in a valley carved by ancient waters, now just a ribbon of creek that separated their land from the foothills beyond. Their cabin was weathered pine, darkened by years of sun and wind. A small barn housed their livestock, 2 horses, a milk cow, and chickens that scratched in the dirt yard. Clara's father, Jeremiah Hawkins, stood on the porch, rifle resting against the railing within easy reach. He was tall and lean, his face a map of hard lines and deeper sorrows. Clara's mother had died 5 winters past, leaving behind a silence that neither father nor daughter knew how to fill. Those clouds mean rain, Jeremiah said as Clara approached with a basket of eggs. Might get that garden you've been wanting. Clara nodded, her eyes drifting to the distant mountains. Apache territory. The place where settlers disappeared. Don't you go wandering today, her father added, reading her thoughts. Jameson saw smoke signals yesterday. They're moving. The Apache have always been here, Pop, Clara said. This is their home too. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. Not anymore, it ain't. Inside, Clara placed the eggs in a bowl and moved to the window. Her reflection stared back, a woman of 22, with untamed brown hair and eyes that matched the color of the creek water. Not pretty by town standards, but strong. Her hands were calloused from work, her skin darkened by days spent outdoors. The town of Copper Springs lay 10 miles east, a collection of wooden buildings and narrow mines. Clara avoided it when possible. The whispers followed her there about her mother's strange ways, about Clara's own preference for solitude, about how she sometimes spoke to plants as if they could answer. Touched, they called her. Wild as an Indian. They didn't know how right they were. The following morning, Clara slipped away before dawn. She followed the creek upstream, gathering herbs that grew along its banks. The air was cool, birds calling to one another as light spread across the land. She rounded a bend and stopped. A man lay face down at the water's edge, one arm outstretched toward the creek. Blood had soaked through his buckskin shirt. Clara approached cautiously. The man was Apache, she could tell by his clothing, by the way his hair was bound. A scout, most likely, traveling alone. She knelt beside him, gently turning him onto his back. His eyes fluttered open, dark and pain-filled. A knife wound crossed his ribs, not deep enough to kill but bleeding steadily. Be still, Clara whispered. She tore a strip from her petticoat and soaked it in the creek. As she cleaned his wound, his hand shot up, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. I'm helping you, she said, meeting his gaze. Helping. His grip loosened. Clara worked quickly, applying a poultice of herbs to the wound before binding it with more cloth. When she finished, she cupped water in her hands and held it to his lips. He drank deeply, eyes never leaving her face. Koa, he said finally, touching his chest. Clara, she replied, pointing to herself. He nodded once before his eyes closed again. Clara dragged him to the shade of a nearby mesquite tree and made him as comfortable as possible. She couldn't bring him home. Her father would shoot him on sight. But she couldn't leave him either. So she waited, tending to him through the morning hours, until the sound of approaching riders shattered the quiet. The Apache warriors circled Clara and the wounded scout, their horses kicking up dust that hung in the still air. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a face marked by a diagonal scar, dismounted and approached. Clara stood her ground, though fear pulsed through her veins like ice water. The leader looked from Clara to Koa, taking in the bandages, the water skin, the herbs laid out on a cloth. His expression revealed nothing. Koa spoke then, his voice weak but steady. The words were foreign to Clara, but she understood their meaning well enough. He was telling them what she had done. The leader's eyes returned to Clara. He studied her for a long moment before nodding once, a gesture so much like Koa's that Clara wondered if they were related. Najoni, he said finally. He remounted his horse and spoke to the others. 2 warriors dismounted, carefully lifting Koa onto one of their horses. Before they departed, the leader reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew something small. He tossed it to Clara. She caught it reflexively, a small carved stone eagle, hanging from a leather cord. By the time she looked up again, the warriors were riding away, Koa secure among them. The leader glanced back once, raising his hand in what might have been farewell or warning. Clara stood alone by the creek, the stone eagle warm in her palm, wondering what she had set in motion. "Where have you been?" Jeremiah demanded when Clara returned to the homestead. "Been looking all over for you." "Just gathering herbs," Clara said, slipping the stone eagle into her pocket. "Lost track of time." Her father grunted, unconvinced. "Town's all stirred up. Apache raiding party hit the Miller place last night. Took their horses and supplies." Clara's stomach tightened. "Anyone hurt?" "Nah. Millers were in town for supplies." Jeremiah picked up his rifle. "I'm riding out with some men to track them. Bar the door tonight." After he left, Clara sat at the table, the stone eagle before her. She traced its carved features with her fingertip, wondering about the man who had made it, about Koa and his people, about the leader with the scarred face. That night, she dreamed of eagles soaring over mountains, of creek water running red with blood, of her mother's face, a face she could barely remember now, smiling at her from the shadows of a teepee. A week passed. Clara's father returned empty-handed from the tracking expedition, his mood darker than ever. Rumors spread through the valley, Apache warriors gathering in large numbers, settlers abandoning outlying homesteads, the cavalry being summoned from Fort Davis. Clara continued her daily chores, but her thoughts remained with Koa. Had he survived? Would she ever see him again? The stone eagle hung from a cord around her neck, hidden beneath her dress, a secret weight against her heart. On the 7th day, as dusk settled over the land, Clara saw him. A lone figure at the edge of their property, partially hidden by a stand of cottonwoods. She recognized his silhouette immediately. She waited until her father was asleep before slipping out the back door, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. Koa stepped from the shadows as she approached. His wound had healed well. He stood straight, moving with the fluid grace she remembered. In the moonlight, she could see his features clearly for the first time, high cheekbones, a straight nose, eyes that seemed to hold the darkness itself. "You came back," Clara whispered. Koa nodded. "To thank you." His English was accented but clear. "You saved my life." "You speak English," Clara said, surprised. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I learned from a missionary. Before we killed him." Clara took an involuntary step back. Koa's expression softened. "That was a joke. He died of fever." An awkward silence fell between them. "You're wound? It's better?" Clara finally asked. "Yes." Koa touched his side. "Your medicine is good. You know the old ways." Clara thought of her mother, of the knowledge passed down in whispers and demonstrations. "My mother taught me some. Before she died." Koa's gaze was steady. "The eagle I gave you, do you wear it?" Clara reached beneath her dress and pulled out the stone pendant. "Yes." "Good. It will protect you in the days to come." "What do you mean?" Koa looked toward the mountains. "War is coming. My people will not surrender their lands. Your people will not stop taking them." "I don't want war," Clara said. "Few do. But it finds us anyway." Koa's eyes returned to her face. "I will come again, if you wish it." Clara knew she should say no. Her father would kill Koa if he found him here. The town would brand her a traitor for speaking with an Apache. Yet something deeper than fear moved within her. "I wish it," she said. Over the next month, Koa came to her 5 times, always after dark, always when Jeremiah was asleep or away. They would meet by the creek, sitting beneath the stars, talking in low voices about their lives, their peoples, the growing tensions between them. Clara learned that Koa was the younger brother of Nakohi, the war chief with the scarred face. That his people called themselves D, not Apache. That they believed the mountains and rivers were alive with spirits. That they were starving as settlers claimed more hunting grounds. In turn, she told him about her mother's death, her father's bitterness, her own dreams of a different life. She showed him how to use various herbs, shared stories her mother had told her, confessed her loneliness among her own kind. On the 5th night, as they sat side by side watching the moon's reflection in the creek, Koa's hand found hers. His touch was warm, calloused from a life of hunting and fighting. Clara didn't pull away. In another time, another world, Koa said softly, this would be simple. Clara turned to him, her heart beating like a trapped bird. And in this world? Instead of answering, Koa leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning. When he pulled back, his eyes searched her face. In this world, he said, we must be brave. Clara knew then that she loved him, this man from a people she had been taught to fear. This man whose world was so different from her own, yet whose heart seemed to beat in time with hers. I am brave, she whispered, and kissed him again. The following day, a military detachment arrived in Copper Springs, 20 soldiers led by a Lieutenant Hayes, a young man with cold eyes and a reputation for efficiency in dealing with the Indian problem. Clara learned of their arrival when her father returned from town, excitement coloring his usually dour expression. Army's here, he announced, hanging his hat by the door. About time the government did something about these savages. Clara kept her face carefully neutral as she set the table for supper. What are they planning to do? Drive them back into the reservation where they belong, or put them in the ground? Jeremiah sat heavily in his chair. Lieutenant's calling a town meeting tomorrow. All men are expected to attend. And if the Apache don't want to go to the reservation? Clara asked, setting a plate of cornbread on the table. Her father gave her a sharp look. Then they'll die where they stand. It's progress, Clara. Can't stop it any more than you can stop the sun from rising. That night, Clara lay awake, fear gnawing at her insides. She needed to warn Koa, but he wasn't due to visit for another 2 days. By then, it might be too late. As dawn broke, she made her decision. While her father prepared for the town meeting, Clara saddled her horse and told him she was gathering herbs in the foothills. Be back by sundown, Jeremiah warned. And stay clear of the North Ridge. That's where Hayes thinks they're camped. Clara nodded, guilt and determination warring within her. As soon as her father rode toward town, she turned her horse north. The Apache camp was well hidden in a box canyon, invisible until Clara was almost upon it. She might have missed it entirely if not for the child who spotted her first, a small boy who raised the alarm with a high, piercing call. Warriors emerged from teepees and brush shelters, bows drawn, rifles aimed. Among them was Nakohi, his scarred face darkening when he recognized her. Words burst from her in a rush. Soldiers in town, 20 of them, planning to attack. I came to warn Koa. Nakohi barked an order, and the warriors lowered their weapons slightly. He approached Clara's horse, his expression unreadable. Where is Koa? Clara asked. Hunting, Nakohi replied. Why do you bring this warning? Clara's hand went to the stone eagle at her throat. Because Koa is my friend. Because I don't want war any more than you do. Nakohi studied her for a long moment. Dismount, he finally said. You will wait for Koa here. Clara slid from her horse, aware of the stairs following her as Nakohi led her into the camp. Women paused in their work to watch her pass. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. The air smelled of wood smoke and cooking meat. Nakohi brought her to a teepee at the camp center. Wait inside, he instructed. Touch nothing. The teepee's interior was dim after the bright sunlight. As her eyes adjusted, Clara saw that it was sparsely furnished, a bedroll of furs, a small fire pit, weapons and tools hanging from the support poles. A medicine bundle hung from the center pole, feathers and small bones dangling from it. Clara sat cross-legged on a woven mat, trying to calm her racing heart. She had entered the lion's den, and now could only hope that Koa would return before her father discovered her absence. Hours passed. Outside, she could hear the camp's activities continuing, children playing, women talking, men discussing what her warning might mean. No one entered the teepee, though she occasionally caught glimpses of faces peering through the entrance flap. Late in the afternoon, a commotion arose, voices calling out, horses approaching. Clara's pulse quickened. She stood as the teepee flap was thrown back, and Koa stood framed in the entrance, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. Clara, he said, stepping inside. What are you doing here? She told him about the soldiers, about the planned attack, about her fear for him and his people. As she spoke, Koa's expression hardened. You risked much to bring this warning, he said when she finished. I couldn't let them hurt you, Clara replied simply. Koa touched her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. My brother says you were the eagle. Always. Do you know what it means? Among my people. Clara shook her head. It is a token of intention. When a man gives it to a woman, he is saying that he sees her as a potential wife. Clara's breath caught. Did you know this when you gave it to me? I knew. Koa's eyes held hers. Though I did not expect to feel as I now do. Before Clara could respond, the teepee flap opened again, and Nakohi entered. He spoke rapidly to Koa in their language, his tone urgent. Koa's face darkened. He turned to Clara. Your father and the soldiers are coming. They followed your trail. Fear shot through Clara like lightning. I have to go to them. Explain. There is no time, Nakohi cut in. They're already too close. We must move the camp. Let me talk to them, Clara pleaded. My father will listen to me. Koa and Nakohi exchanged looks. She is right, Koa said finally. It is our best chance to avoid bloodshed. Nakohi considered this, then nodded once. Go. But know this, if you betray us, if you lead them to our new camp, the next time we meet will be in battle. I won't betray you, Clara promised. Koa took her hands in his. Ride to them. Tell them you were lost. Tell them you saw nothing. When it is safe, come to the place where we first met. I will find you there. Clara nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. Be careful. And you. Koa pressed his forehead to hers briefly before leading her out of the teepee. The camp was already being dismantled, women packing belongings, men gathering horses. Clara mounted her horse, taking one last look at Koa before riding toward the approaching search party, her heart heavy with the weight of divided loyalties. What in God's name were you thinking? Jeremiah's face was flushed with anger as they rode back toward the homestead, soldiers flanking them on either side. Do you have any idea what these men thought when they found your trail leading to Indian territory? I got lost, Pa. Clara repeated the lie for what felt like the 100th time. I was looking for that stand of willow where Ma used to gather bark for headaches. I didn't realize I'd gone so far north. Lieutenant Hayes rode up alongside them, his gaze cold and assessing. Mighty coincidental, Miss Hawkins, that you'd get lost on the very day we planned to scout Apache positions. I don't know anything about your plans, Lieutenant, Clara said, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm just grateful you and Pa found me before anything happened. Hayes didn't look convinced, but he dropped back to confer with his sergeant. He thinks you're lying, Jeremiah said in a low voice. And so do I. Clara said nothing, keeping her eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Her father had always been able to read her too well. That night, after the soldiers departed to make camp near town, Jeremiah confronted her in the cabin's main room. Tell me the truth, Clara. Were you meeting someone out there? Clara busied herself with the dishes, buying time. What do you mean? I'm not a fool. You've been sneaking out at night, disappearing during the day, always with some excuse about herbs or berries. Jeremiah's voice was dangerously quiet. Is it one of them? Have you been meeting with an Apache? The plate in Clara's hands clattered to the table. She turned to face her father, her heart pounding. And if I have? The color drained from Jeremiah's face. Jesus Christ, Clara. Tell me you haven't. His name is Koa, Clara said, her voice stronger than she felt. He's a good man. He's a savage. Jeremiah slammed his fist on the table. They killed settlers not 20 miles from here last month. Took a woman captive. Is that what you want? To end up like that? Koa wouldn't hurt me. His people are defending their homes, their way of life. Their way of life. Jeremiah laughed bitterly. You sound just like your mother. Clara stilled. What do you mean? Her father turned away, running a hand over his face. Nothing. Forget I said anything. No. Clara moved to stand in front of him. What about my mother? Jeremiah looked at her for a long moment, something like defeat in his eyes. She had notions. About the Apache. About how we should live alongside them instead of fighting them. He sighed heavily. She spent time with them before we were married. Learned their ways. Their language. Clara felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. She knew the Apache? She lived with them for a time. Her father, your grandfather, was a trader. Did business with several tribes. Jeremiah's voice was flat. That's how she learned about the plants, the medicines. From them. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I wanted to protect you. Jeremiah's voice rose. Because her ideas got her killed. Clara stepped back, shocked. What? Ma died of fever. You told me. She died because she tried to stop a fight between settlers and Apache. Jeremiah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She rode out alone, tried to negotiate. Got caught in the crossfire. The room seemed to spin around Clara. Her mother, the gentle woman she remembered only in fragments, had been a mediator between worlds. Just as Clara was trying to be. There's more, Jeremiah said, his voice dropping. In your mother's things. A chest in the root cellar. I could never bring myself to get rid of it. Clara stood frozen as her father left the room. She heard the outside door open and close, followed by his heavy footsteps crossing the yard toward the barn. When he was gone, she lit a lantern and descended the narrow steps to the root cellar. In the far corner, Behind sacks of potatoes and onions, she found a small wooden chest, its surface coated with dust. The chest wasn't locked. Inside, Clara found letters, dozens of them, tied with faded ribbon. Beneath these were items wrapped in cloth, a beaded bracelet, a small leather pouch filled with herbs, a carved wooden comb, and at the very bottom, a folded piece of buckskin. Clara unwrapped it with trembling fingers to reveal a necklace unlike any she had seen before, a circular pendant of silver and turquoise, intricate designs etched into its surface, hanging from a chain of small silver beads. As she held it up to the lantern light, a folded paper fell from the buckskin wrapping. Clara opened it to find her mother's handwriting, the ink faded but still legible. My dearest Clara, asterisk if you are reading this, then I am gone, and your father has finally shared with you the truth of my past. I lived among the D for 2 years as a young woman. They called me Nada, meaning eyes, for my blue eyes that reminded them of the sky. I learned their ways, their medicines, their deep connection to the land. Asterisk. Asterisk I fell in love with a warrior named Tanito. We were to be married, but my father forbade it and took me away. I later met your father and found a different kind of love with him. Asterisk. Asterisk the necklace you now hold was to be my wedding gift, my dowry from Tanito's family. I kept it all these years as a reminder of a path not taken, a life unlived. Asterisk. Asterisk the Apache are not the savages many believe them to be. They are proud, spiritual people fighting for survival. Whatever you have been told about them, know that there is another side to the story. Asterisk. Asterisk I hope you never need this knowledge. I hope the world you inherit is one of peace between our peoples. But if conflict continues, remember that hatred is a choice, and so is compassion. Asterisk. With all my love. Mother. Clara read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision. Her mother had loved an Apache warrior, had nearly become one of them. The knowledge settled into Clara's bones, feeling not like a revelation but like a memory, something she had always known but forgotten. She fastened the necklace around her throat, the silver warm against her skin. It felt right there, as if it had been waiting for her all along. When she emerged from the root cellar, Jeremiah was standing in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His eyes went immediately to the necklace. So now you know, he said quietly. Clara touched the pendant. Why didn't you tell me? And say what? That your mother nearly chose one of them over her own kind? That she never fully belonged here, with me? Jeremiah drained his glass. I wanted to protect you from her mistakes. They weren't mistakes, Pa. They were choices. Her choices. Clara straightened her shoulders. Just as I've made mine. Jeremiah's expression hardened. If you're talking about that Apache, his name is Koa. I don't give a damn what his name is. This ends now, Clara. You're my daughter, and while you live under my roof, then perhaps I shouldn't live under your roof anymore, Clara said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. Her father stared at her, shock giving way to anger, then to a deep sadness. You'd choose him? Over your own family? Your own people? Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm not choosing anyone over you, Pa. I'm choosing a path where I don't have to choose. Just like I tried to do. And look where it got her. Jeremiah's voice broke. Dead before her time. At least she died trying to make peace. That's more than most can say. Father and daughter stood facing each other across the kitchen, the weight of unspoken words, of history and blood and divided loyalties, hanging in the air between them. Finally, Jeremiah turned away. Dawn comes early. Get some sleep. Clara knew the conversation wasn't over, merely postponed. As she climbed the ladder to her loft bedroom, the silver pendant and stone eagle both hung around her neck, symbols of 2 worlds that had always been part of her, though she hadn't known it until now. Clara woke before dawn, her decision made in the quiet hours of the night. She dressed quickly, packing a small bundle of clothes and necessities. Her mother's letters and the few keepsakes from the chest went into a leather satchel. She paused at her father's bedroom door, listening to his steady breathing. Part of her wanted to wake him, to try once more to make him understand. But she knew his mind was set, just as hers was. Instead, she left a letter on the kitchen table, explaining as best she could. Not a permanent goodbye, she wrote, but a journey she needed to take to understand her mother's path, to find her own place between worlds. As the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky, Clara saddled her horse and rode toward the creek where she had first met Koa. She didn't know if he would be there, or if she would have to search for him. She only knew that she couldn't stay, couldn't pretend that her heart wasn't already divided between the world of her father and the world of her mother's almost husband. The creek was silent in the early morning, mist rising from its surface like spirits. Clara dismounted, letting her horse drink while she waited, watching the light strengthen across the land. She didn't hear Koa approach. He moved as silently as the mist itself. One moment she was alone. The next, he stood beside her, his dark eyes taking in her packed horse, her traveling clothes, the necklace at her throat. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Clara nodded. "I learned things about my mother. About her connection to your people." She touched the silver pendant. This was to be her dowry. She was to marry a warrior named Tanito. Koa's eyes widened. Tanito was my father's cousin. He never married after the white trader took his daughter away. "Then we are already connected," Clara said softly. "Our paths crossed long before we met." "What does this mean for us?" Koa asked. Clara took his hands in hers. "It means I want to learn. About your people. About my mother's time with them. About this part of myself I never knew existed." "And your father?" "He doesn't understand." "Not yet. Maybe never." Clara's voice wavered. "But I left him a letter. Told him I'd return when I could." Koa was silent for a long moment, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. "My people are preparing for war. It is not a good time for a white woman to join us." "I'm not entirely white," Clara said. "Not in my heart. And I don't want war any more than my mother did. Maybe I can help prevent it, just as she tried to do. It may already be too late for that." "Then let me try anyway." Koa studied her face, as if memorizing every feature. Then he nodded once. "Come. We must travel quickly. Nakohi will not be pleased, but he will respect your mother's connection to Tanito." They mounted their horses and rode north toward the mountains. Clara didn't look back at the valley, at the homestead growing small in the distance. She kept her eyes fixed on the path ahead, on the man riding beside her, on the future that waited beyond the horizon. The Apache camp had relocated to a high valley nestled between two mountain ridges. As Koa led Clara into the circle of teepees, silence fell over the people gathered there. Women paused in their work. Men straightened from their tasks. Children stared with undisguised curiosity. Nakohi emerged from the central teepee, his scarred face darkening when he saw Clara. "Why have you brought her here?" he demanded in English. Koa dismounted, helping Clara down from her horse. "She comes of her own will, and she brings news of her connection to our people." Nakohi's eyes narrowed as Koa explained about Clara's mother, about Tanito, about the dowry necklace that now hung around Clara's neck. When Koa finished, Nakohi approached Clara slowly. He studied the necklace, touching it briefly with one finger. "I remember this. My mother helped make it for Tanito's bride." His eyes lifted to Clara's face. "You have her eyes. The blue that gave her the name Nada." "You knew my mother?" Clara asked, surprised. "I was a boy when she lived among us. But yes, I knew her." Something softened in Nakohi's expression. "She was kind. Brave. She learned our ways quickly." "I want to learn too," Clara said. "I want to understand this part of myself." Nakohi was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "You may stay. For now. The women will teach you our ways." His gaze hardened again. "But know this, if the soldiers come, if your father leads them here, your mother's blood will not protect you." "I understand," Clara said. "But my father won't come. He thinks I've gone east, to my aunt in St. Louis. Let us hope he believes your lie." Nakohi turned to address the gathered people in their language. Whatever he said caused the tension to ease, the women returning to their tasks, the men dispersing to their duties. An older woman approached, her face deeply lined, but her eyes kind. She took Clara's hand, speaking words Clara couldn't understand. "This is Leo Tai," Koa explained. "She was friends with your mother. She will teach you our language, our ways." Clara smiled at the woman, who returned the smile with a gentle squeeze of her hand. "Go with her," Koa said. "I must speak with my brother about the soldiers." As Leo Tai led Clara toward a teepee at the edge of camp, Clara glanced back at Koa. He stood with Nakohi, both men looking toward the valley below, their expressions grave. The weight of what was coming, what might be inevitable despite her hopes, settled on Clara's shoulders like a heavy cloak. Days passed, then weeks. Under Leoty's patient guidance, Clara learned the basics of the Apache language, how to prepare foods, how to tan hides and sew clothing. The women accepted her gradually, their initial suspicion giving way to cautious friendship as they saw her willingness to work, to learn, to adapt. The children were quicker to welcome her, especially after she began telling them stories from her mother's letters, tales of two worlds meeting, of understanding across differences. They called her Blue Eyes in their language, just as they had called her mother. Koa visited when he could, but he was often away, scouting, hunting, meeting with other bands to discuss the growing threat from the soldiers. When they were together, they spoke of many things, of their childhoods, their hopes, their fears for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, watching the stars emerge above the mountains, their hands intertwined. Clara knew she was falling deeper in love with him with each passing day, and she knew that their love existed in the shadow of coming conflict. The news from the valley was grim. More soldiers had arrived in Copper Springs. Settlers were forming militia groups. The reservation officials were demanding that all Apache bands surrender or face military action. It cannot be avoided now, Nakoi told the Council of Warriors one evening. Clara sat at the edge of the circle, her presence tolerated because of Koa and her mother's connection. They will come for us before the snow falls. Then we should strike first, one of the younger warriors argued. Hit the town, drive the settlers out, and bring the full might of the army down upon us? Nakoi shook his head. No. We will prepare, but we will not attack first. What about the woman? Another warrior asked, nodding toward Clara. She could help us negotiate. All eyes turned to Clara. She felt the weight of their gaze, the weight of history and blood and conflicting loyalties. I will try, she said. If you think it would help. Nakoi considered this. Perhaps, but not yet. The soldiers are still searching for us. If you go down to the valley now, they will follow you back. The council continued late into the night, strategies discussed and discarded, options weighed and found wanting. Through it all, Clara listened, her heart heavy with the knowledge that these proud people, now her people too, in a way, were fighting for their very survival. Later, as she and Koa walked back to her teepee, he took her hand. You should not have offered to negotiate. It is too dangerous. I have to try, Clara said. For my mother's sake. For our sake. Koa stopped, turning to face her in the moonlight. There may not be an Arsake, Clara. If war comes. Don't say that. She pressed her fingers to his lips. There has to be a way. Koa took her hand, kissing her palm before pressing it to his chest, over his heart. My people have a saying, the eagle and the hawk may love each other, but they cannot build a nest together. Why not? Clara challenged. Because others say they can't? Because it hasn't been done before. A smile touched Koa's lips. You are as stubborn as Nada was said to be. Good. Then maybe I can succeed where she failed. They stood together under the vast canopy of stars, two people from different worlds, bound by love and blood and a shared hope that seemed to grow more fragile with each passing day. The first snow fell early that year, dusting the high peaks while the valley below remained in the grip of autumn. Clara had been with the Apache for nearly 2 months, long enough to see the changes in herself, her skin darkened by the sun, her hands calloused from new work, her speech peppered with Apache words. Her heart divided no longer but firmly planted in this place, with these people. With Koa. They had not spoken of marriage, though Clara knew that was where their path led if peace could be maintained. The stone eagle and silver pendant she wore were symbols enough for now, promises of a future they both hoped for but neither dared to claim outright. The news from below grew worse. Lieutenant Hayes had declared that all Apache must surrender by the first full moon of winter or face extermination. Settlers were abandoning outlying homesteads, consolidating in town where the soldiers could protect them. And Jeremiah Hawkins was leading scouting parties into the foothills, searching for his daughter. This last piece of news struck Clara like a physical blow. She had hoped her letter would convince her father that she had gone east. Instead, he had seen through her deception and was now risking his life to find her. I have to go to him, she told Koa as they sat by the small fire in her teepee. Before he gets himself killed. Before he leads the soldiers to us. Koa's face was grave in the firelight. It is too dangerous. Hayes has declared that any white person found with the Apache will be considered a traitor. He's my father, Koa. I can't let him wander the mountains looking for me. Koa was silent for a long moment. Then I will go with you. No, that's even more dangerous. Clara took his hands in hers. I'll go alone. Meet him at our homestead. Convince him that I'm safe, that I've made my choice freely. And if he tries to keep you there, he won't. Clara's voice was firm. Not once he understands. They argued long into the night, but in the end, Clara's determination won out. She would ride down to the valley the following day, find her father, and try to make him understand. Koa would wait 3 days. If she didn't return, he would come looking for her, though they both knew what dangers that might bring. As dawn broke, Clara prepared for the journey. She dressed in her old clothes, though she kept the stone eagle and silver pendant around her neck, hidden beneath her blouse. Leodai helped her pack food for the journey, her lined face creased with worry. Be careful, Blue Eyes, she said in halting English. Come back to us. I will, Clara promised, embracing the older woman who had become like a second mother to her. The entire camp gathered to see her off. Nakohi approached as she mounted her horse. Remember, he said, his voice low, if you betray us. I won't, Clara cut him off. You are my people now too. Something like respect flickered in Nakohi's eyes. He nodded once before stepping back. Koa was the last to approach. He placed his hand on her leg, looking up at her with eyes that held both love and fear. 3 days, he said. Not 1 hour more. Clara leaned down and kissed him, not caring who saw. 3 days, she agreed. Then she turned her horse and rode down the mountain path, feeling the eyes of the camp following her until she disappeared into the trees. The Hawkins homestead stood silent in the late afternoon light. Smoke rose from the chimney, telling Clara that someone was home. She approached cautiously, alert for any sign of soldiers or other visitors. The door opened as she reached the yard. Jeremiah Hawkins stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. He froze when he saw her, his face a complex map of emotions: relief, anger, joy, suspicion. Clara, he said, as if not quite believing his eyes. She dismounted slowly. Hello, Pa. For a moment, neither moved. Then Jeremiah set his rifle against the wall and descended the steps, crossing the yard in long strides. He stopped just short of embracing her, his hands hovering uncertainly. Are you? Did they? He couldn't seem to find the words. I'm fine, Pa. I came of my own free will. No one forced me to do anything. Jeremiah's eyes searched her face, noting the changes, the new confidence, the subtle differences in how she held herself. You've been with them all this time. With the Apache. It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. Yes. Come inside. There's stew on the stove. The familiar kitchen was exactly as she had left it, yet it felt smaller somehow, the ceiling lower, the walls closer. Clara sat at the table while her father ladled stew into bowls. You had us all worried sick, Jeremiah said as he set a bowl before her. The whole town's been out looking for you. Hayes has patrols in the foothills. I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'm not sorry for going. Clara met her father's gaze steadily. I needed to understand that part of myself. The part that comes from Ma. Jeremiah's jaw tightened at the mention of his wife. And did you? Understand? I'm beginning to. Clara touched the hidden pendants beneath her blouse. The Apache, they're not what we've been told. They're people, Pa, with families and hopes and fears, just like us. They're killers. Some are. Just as some white men are. Clara leaned forward. But most just want to live in peace, to keep their lands, to preserve their way of life. Jeremiah shook his head. It's too late for that. Hayes has orders to bring them in, all of them. Those who resist will be shot. Fear clutched at Clara's heart. When? Soon. They're just waiting on reinforcements from Fort Davis. Jeremiah studied his daughter's face. You care for them. For him. Clara didn't pretend to misunderstand. His name is Koa. And yes, I care for him. The way your mother cared for that warrior? Tanito. You knew about him? Jeremiah's laugh was bitter. Of course I knew. Your mother told me everything before we married. I thought foolishly that knowing would make it easier, that I wouldn't always be wondering if she was comparing me to him. Did she? Compare you? Not aloud. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at the mountains, and I knew where her thoughts had gone. Jeremiah's voice softened. I loved her anyway, with all her divided heart. Clara reached across the table and took her father's hand. My heart isn't divided anymore, Pa. I know where I belong. Pain flashed across Jeremiah's face. With them. With him. Yes. I can't let you go back, Clara. Hayes has men watching the trails. If they catch you with the Apache. They won't catch me. You don't understand. This isn't some game. Hayes means to end this, once and for all. Then help me warn them, Clara pleaded. Help me get them safely to the reservation before the soldiers come. Jeremiah stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. You're asking me to betray my own people? I'm asking you to help prevent a massacre. To honor what Ma tried to do. Clara's voice broke. Please, Pa. I can't lose them. I can't lose him. Her father was silent for a long time, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Finally, he sighed heavily. Your mother would have been proud of you. Terrified for you. But proud. Does that mean you'll help? It means I'll think on it. Tonight, you stay here. We'll talk more in the morning. Clara knew it was the best she could hope for. She ate her stew, answering her father's questions about her time with the Apache, carefully omitting details about the camp's location. As darkness fell, exhaustion overtook her, and she climbed the ladder to her old loft bedroom. Everything was as she had left it, The patchwork quilt on the narrow bed, the small bookshelf with her favorite volumes, the rag rug her mother had made. Clara lay down fully clothed, intending only to rest for a moment before continuing her conversation with her father. She woke to the sound of horses in the yard. Dawn was just breaking as Clara crept to the small window. What she saw made her blood run cold. Lieutenant Hayes and a dozen soldiers dismounting, her father going out to meet them. She couldn't hear their conversation, but Hayes's gestures were animated, pointing toward the mountains, then back at the cabin. Jeremiah shook his head repeatedly, his stance defensive. Clara dressed quickly, her mind racing. Had her father summoned the soldiers? Or had they come on their own, perhaps following her trail just as they had before? She descended the ladder quietly, pausing at the bottom to listen. The front door opened, and heavy footsteps entered the cabin. Just want to ask her a few questions, Hayes was saying. She's been living with them for months. She knows where they're camped. My daughter's been through enough, Jeremiah replied. Let her rest. This isn't a request, Hawkins. It's an order. Clara stepped into the kitchen. Both men turned to look at her, Hayes with triumph, her father with resignation. Miss Hawkins, Hayes said, removing his hat. I'm glad to see you've returned safely. Lieutenant. Clara nodded coolly. What brings you here so early? Information suggests you've been living with the Apache. I need to know where they're camped. Information? Clara's eyes went to her father, who shook his head slightly. One of my patrols spotted you riding down from the North Ridge yesterday, Hayes explained. They followed your trail back here. Relief washed through Clara. Her father hadn't betrayed her. But the danger was no less real. I don't know where they're camped, she lied. I was held at a temporary camp. They blindfolded me when they moved. Hayes's expression hardened. Miss Hawkins, harboring information about hostile Indians is treason. I could have you arrested. On what charges? Jeremiah demanded. My daughter was a captive. Was she? Hayes looked pointedly at Clara's healthy appearance, her unbound hands. She doesn't look like any captive I've ever seen. Nevertheless, that's what she was, Jeremiah insisted. And she's home now. That's all that matters. Hayes studied them both, suspicion clear in his eyes. I'll be stationing men around your property, Hawkins. If your daughter tries to leave, they'll stop her. He turned to Clara. And if I find you've been lying about the Apache camp, you'll face a military tribunal. With that, he replaced his hat and strode from the cabin. Through the window, Clara watched him issue orders to his men before mounting his horse and riding toward town. Did you tell him I was here? She asked her father when they were alone. No, but I knew they'd find out eventually. Jeremiah ran a hand over his face. I was coming to wake you, to warn you. I have to get back, Pa. I promised Koa I'd return in 3 days. If I don't, he'll come looking for me. You can't leave. Hayes has men watching the property. Then help me. Clara gripped her father's arms. Help me get a message to Koa. Tell him what's happening, that Hayes is preparing to attack. Jeremiah looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. There's a back trail through the western ravine. Hayes doesn't know about it. I could take a message. Hope surged in Clara's chest. You do that. For you. Not for them. Jeremiah's eyes were solemn. Write your message. I'll deliver it tonight. Clara threw her arms around her father, tears of gratitude stinging her eyes. Thank you, Pa. Jeremiah held her tightly, his voice rough with emotion. I couldn't save your mother. Maybe I can save you. Night fell, bringing with it a heavy mist that shrouded the valley. Perfect cover for Jeremiah's mission. Clara watched from her window as her father slipped from the barn and disappeared into the darkness, her message to Koa secure in his pocket. She had written it in both English and the Apache words she had learned, explaining the situation, warning of Hayes's plans, begging Koa not to come for her but to lead his people to safety. I will find a way back to you, she had written. Asterisk, wait for me at the place where the river meets the red rocks. I will come when it is safe. Asterisk. Now all she could do was wait and pray that her father would find Koa, that Koa would heed her warning, that Hayes wouldn't discover her deception. The hours crept by. Clara paced her small bedroom, too anxious to sleep. When dawn came, her father had not returned. Morning turned to afternoon with no sign of him. The soldiers Hayes had posted watched the cabin with bored vigilance, changing shifts at midday. As evening approached, Clara's worry deepened. Had her father been captured? Had he fallen in the rough terrain? Or, worst of all, had he betrayed her trust and led Hayes to the Apache camp? No, she couldn't believe that. Whatever his feelings about the Apache, Jeremiah Hawkins was a man of his word. If he had promised to deliver her message, then that was what he would do. The sun was setting when she heard horses approaching. Clara rushed to the window. Hayes was returning, a group of soldiers with him, and in their midst, a prisoner on horseback, hands bound, head bowed. Her father. Clara flew down the ladder and out the door, running to meet the riders as they entered the yard. "Pa," she cried. "What have you done to him?" Hayes dismounted, his expression grim. "Your father was caught trying to deliver a message to the Apache. A message from you." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, her letter to Koa. "He's my father," Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You have no right to treat him like this. He's a traitor, just like you." Hayes nodded to his men. "Take them both inside. Post guards at all doors and windows." Soldiers grabbed Clara's arms, dragging her back toward the cabin despite her struggles. Others cut Jeremiah from his horse and marched him after her. Inside, they were forced into chairs at the kitchen table, Hayes pacing before them like a prosecutor before a jury. "I gave you a chance to cooperate," he said. "Instead, you chose to warn the enemy.